Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope that you have been finding ways to notice moments of oneness this month and that you're actively participating in developing a consciousness of oneness. I've spoken many times this month about the use of storytelling and participation in art as ways to achieve oneness. On the one hand, there is something about flow that we can achieve in each of these practices, but there's also something very individual that happens as well. Many of us have had the experience of attending live theater, and there in the dark, hundreds of us, both the audience and the actors, agree to participate in a kind of mass delusion as we suspend disbelief and we're transported through time and space into a story. If it's a really great performance, we become immersed in it and we lose track of time and we kind of lose track of ourselves. I wonder if it's the same way that medieval peasants might have felt when they entered into a church and they were met with the glory of this wonderful stained glass depicting stories from the Bible. And then they would sit in the pews and suspend their own disbelief as they heard the myth of their own faith recounted over and over again. I think it's no coincidence that the first theaters were actually sacred spaces in the ancient world. Now stripped entirely of any religious or sacred association, theaters and art galleries have become a place where we can step outside of time and participate in our stories being retold again. In the case of art galleries, we see our stories visually represented from the times that we did cave paintings on cave walls until now when we can visit art galleries. We are participating in the retelling of the story of ourselves and what it means to be here, to say that I existed and I was part of this great chain of humanity. Visiting a beautiful cathedral or attending a live theater performance or musical concert or going to an art gallery, and some might even argue attending a sports event, is all part of a communal experience where our stories are retold. As an artist and a storyteller, I appreciate this communal oneness, but there is also a real personal oneness that we can experience through art and storytelling. I spent a lot of time in art galleries in London, and at the Tate Modern, there is a room that is dedicated to the 𝐠𝐫𝐚 murals by Mark Rothko. When I spend an hour in front of those murals, it's not the group experience that I'm looking for, but a singular experience of merging with the artwork and with the artist. They're only bits of color on a canvas, and Mark Rothko's very secret technique of applying these color fields does something to my eye that takes me out of time and space. It makes me become immersed in the image. And in fact, it becomes almost like a doorway into something beyond this world. Now, there are many theories of consciousness, and am I hallucinating that I've gone into this flow or possibly trance state and perceiving something beyond this world? I don't know, but it certainly is a real experience to me. Would someone else have the same experience? Maybe, maybe not. Should I care that these pieces of art were created for a different purpose than what I am experiencing? They were created for a really high-class restaurant in New York, and yet I'm experiencing spiritual oneness when I sit in front of them. Does it matter? One of the things I love most about visual art is that it has a different kind of chemical, or maybe we should say alchemical, experience in the brain than verbal storytelling. I have an emotional reaction to the artwork, and that emotional reaction is mine. But through my emotions, I'm able to feel a kind of communion with the artist, as well as emerging into the artwork. As a visual artist myself, I am an abstract and intuitive artist, and some of my artwork has a narrative quality. But I'm a lover of mystery, and I love to invite the viewer to participate in the experience of this artwork itself. Whenever someone asks me what an artwork means that I've created, I turn the question back on them. And I ask them, what does it mean for them? Because as much as art connects us, it also provides us a way to make meaning of our stories. When I create an intuitive artwork piece, I lay down a lot of color, and then I keep turning the artwork around and around, looking for whatever wants to emerge. In the final artwork, there's often symbols and images that I wasn't even aware are there. And so the artwork has a whole life of its own, and it has a crucial part to play in the oneness that we can all experience in the participation of the arts. There's a lot of crows here today. When the viewer arrives, then they bring an awful lot. The crows want to tell us their story as well. Can you hear them? What do you think they want to say? When the viewer of the artwork arrives, of course, they have a whole new layer of experience and meaning that is added on to the process. And so I see artwork as a collaborative creation of meaning and oneness. And the same process happens with storytelling for me. I am a reluctant filmmaker, but I've been writing since I could form words. And for me, probably the communal aspect of storytelling comes in because I began writing as, writing little scripts and stories that were performed. And that developed into playwriting and broader genres of drama and fiction. Although now, mostly what I do is write nonfiction. But we don't have to have a YouTube channel or produced plays or published works to be a storyteller, because we're all storytellers. Every time we meet friends for coffee and we ask, "How are you doing?" and we answer something other than, "Okay," we are telling our stories to one another. Each of our stories forms a part of the multi-staged play that we call life. When we go to therapy, we tell our stories that we don't want to tell anyone else, and it's a kind of secular confessional. We confront the stories that are difficult to tell, our heartbreak, our shame. And for those stories that we don't know yet how to tell ourselves, we have archetypes and mythology that appear in our dreams. We each have our own story to tell, but those archetypes and myths connect us through time and across cultures. We also can connect through space, through the use of storytelling. We don't have to actually time travel or travel to Berlin 1942 to know what happened there. We can look to historical accounts and stories, or we can look to drama and fiction to zero in on a single moment or an individual perspective. And through that singular moment or perspective, we can extract that which is universal to us all. When you think about it, we're all part of the oneness of the story, whether we're the one that is telling a story or we are actively listening. And while I have your attention, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I think a lot about whose stories do we have the right to tell. Sometimes a story will impact on our lives greatly, but it's not ours to tell because it involves somebody else's personal history, or because we are not a part of the group identity wherein the story needs to be told. And to tell it would be to appropriate the voice of those who belong to that group. As much as our stories are crucial for holding together our relationships, our community, and our values, if we tell the stories that are not ours to tell, for instance, if we start gossiping, then it can destroy relationships, it can destroy communities, and it can destroy our values, especially, for instance, the value of trust. But sometimes other people's stories impact on us, and living a lie is very isolating. We need to tell the part of the story that is our own, and for that we need our confidants. During this pandemic, it's been difficult for us to connect with one another, and so we've had to turn to technology. At the beginning of the pandemic, I organized a group project with several other YouTubers, and we looked at whether we could use technology to develop interpersonal closeness between what was essentially a group of strangers. And we found what research has tended to describe after this year of the pandemic. The depth and the quality and the longevity of our closeness really depended on how much we were willing to be vulnerable with one another. Of course, it was impacted by the technology itself and its limits on our ability to interpret nonverbal cues. And of course, because we were on YouTube, it was also impacted by sort of having to perform a little bit and edit for the audience. We've just passed the 1-year mark of the declaration of a pandemic, and we've returned to a focus on oneness and connection. This month, I've launched a new project called The Storytellers. And being a woman and a female-identified storyteller, I have chosen to look for those storytellers who have a voice similar to my own in that grouping. But I hope that over time you'll see that we have a variety of social identities even within that, and a variety of stories. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, then I hope that you will, and I hope that you'll continue to return as I upload future interviews. I do believe that if you use whatever technologies are at your disposal to make a purposeful effort to do as we've done since we lived in caves and gather round the fire and tell stories, you will find that it creates a real sense of communion and community. And in the end, after all, when we are gone from this earth, all that is left is our stories. For what are you most grateful today?